there? Well, I would say right very near the top of the list is the threat of price stability, if inflation does become too persistent, if these high levels of inflation get entrenched in our economy and in people's thinking, then inevitably that will lead to much tighter monetary policy from us, and it could lead to a recession, and that will be bad for work. So we're stimulating. We're not restraining demand at all at this point. We're encouraging it. We're trying to get to a place where we're more neutral and then perhaps tight if that's appropriate.
Asset purchases likely to halt in March, so they are on course to significantly reduce their balance sheet containing mortgage-backed securities and treasury bond holders without indicating a precise timeline. And this is what Fed Chairman Jerome Powell said today, post-meeting, and the market really did not like this. After opening in the green today from a very volatile week in the market, was preparing for rate hikes today. That didn't happen. The markets did close in the red, closed at a negative 130 points at the Dow Jones. He also said that bond buying in February will be cut to 30 billion from last month's 40 billion, stating the Fed could move on to aggressive path. This is one of their tools. Credible threats. Well, we'll get to that in a few minutes. Then he proceeded to say that there is quite a bit of room to raise the interest rates without threatening the labor markets. Said the economy no longer needs sustained high levels of monetary support because asset prices are somewhat elevated, and that the Fed is willing to move sooner and faster than last time in shrinking their balance sheet. Hey guys, it's Jose, your regular Joe Blow again. Like always, keeping an eye out and my ears open. And boy, oh boy, the markets don't like what just happened. The Feds are really crashing this market. They are drying up liquidity like the Sahara Desert. And the markets don't like it. Let's listen in to the minutes today.
We understand that high inflation imposes significant hardship, especially on those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. In addition, we believe that the best thing we can do to support continued labor market gains is to promote a long expansion, and that will require price stability. We're committed to our price stability goal. We will use our tools both to support the economy and a strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched. And we'll be watching carefully to see whether the economy is evolving in line with expectations. The Fed's monetary policy actions have been guided by our mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. As I noted, the committee left the target range for the federal funds rate unchanged and reaffirmed our plan, announced in December, to end asset purchases in early March. In light of the remarkable progress we've seen in the labor market and inflation that is well above our 2% longer-run goal, the economy no longer needs sustained high levels of monetary policy support. That is why we are phasing out our asset purchases and why we expect it will soon be appropriate to raise the target range for the federal funds rate. Of course, the economic outlook remains highly uncertain. Making appropriate monetary policy in this environment requires humility, recognizing that the economy evolves in unexpected ways. We'll need to be nimble so that we can respond to the full range of plausible outcomes. With this in mind, we will remain attentive to risks, including the risk that high inflation is more persistent than expected, and are prepared to respond as appropriate to achieve our goals. To provide greater clarity about our approach for reducing the size of the Federal Reserve's balance sheet, today the committee issued a set of principles that will provide a foundation for our future decisions. These high-level principles clarify that the federal funds rate is our primary means of adjusting monetary policy, and that reducing our balance sheet will occur after the process of raising interest rates has begun. Reductions will occur over time in a predictable manner, primarily through adjustments to reinvestments, so that securities roll off our balance sheet. Over time, we intend to hold securities in the amounts needed for our ample reserves operating framework, and in the longer run, we envision holding primarily Treasury securities. Our decisions to reduce our balance sheet will be guided by our maximum employment and price stability goals. In that regard, we will be prepared to adjust any of the details of our approach to balance sheet management in light of economic and financial development.
We are still at almost 0% interest rates. They are still printing money even if they are reducing their balance sheet. I once read in one of Robert Kiyosaki's books where the only way to stop digging yourself into a hole was to stop shoveling completely, like to let go of the shovel. We all know they are too good for that. That won't happen. They're going to use their number one tool. While they crash this market slowly and by using credible threats. I first heard about this on the Uneducated Economist channel on YouTube. He explains in more detail macroeconomics. In some video, he talks about the mess the Fed has done even in the past 2 years, where the Feds have increased their balance sheets from $4 trillion to now about $9 trillion and still purchasing about $1 trillion a year in mortgage-backed securities and treasuries. Because of this, we have housing bubbles, inflation, bond bubbles, market bubbles, etc. Now back to credible threats. It's what the Fed uses to scare the market to correct itself, as they say. So let's see what the educated economist has been saying. Fair use.
It was going to be about credible threats. The forward guidance, the job owning, the words coming from the Federal Reserve. That is what moves markets. The sheer idea of what the Federal Reserve is going to do into the future is enough to move the markets around. And that's what we're seeing. And what I see coming is more about the Federal Reserve using the attention of the people and telling those people what they plan on doing and getting those people to behave in a certain fashion. That's more about what the Federal Reserve is up to. The interest rates, that has an effect on the markets, but they're not going to use interest rates to try and manipulate the markets anymore. It's more about what they intend on doing with those interest rates that's going to move the markets. So just keep that in mind as we move forward here, because that's really where the policy is going to be. The Fed has powerful tools, even when the shock is unprecedented. Talking about the pandemic and shutting the economy down and all that. We also learned that the Fed has potent tools to deal with even such an unfamiliar crisis. Again, talking about the pandemic. The Fed stepped in and lowered rates for the discount window lending, revived lending facilities from the financial crisis, and created numerous new facilities to lend or support lending to households, small and large businesses, and state and local governments. In all, the Fed created 13 different lending facilities. In most cases, merely announcing these backstops succeeded in stabilizing markets. And, in fact, several facilities experienced very few requests for loans, which I considered a success. So, we learned that when the Fed acts quickly and decisively, our tools can quickly restore confidence even when the loss of confidence is felt as widely as it was in the spring of last year. In addition, when the Fed makes it clear that it is prepared to act without hesitation as a backstop, the fact alone can be sufficient to stem the crisis. So, this is something that we had talked about many times. We knew that the Federal Reserve was going to be using credible threats. And when it came to those 13 lending facilities, we on this channel went over each and every one of those lending facilities individually so that we knew exactly what the Federal Reserve was trying to lend to. Part of that lending facilities was the corporate debt market. Okay, remember this? There was so many YouTubers and economists out there just screaming about what the Federal Reserve was doing and buying up this corporate debt and how they were going to be supporting these corporations and all kinds of stuff. You know, they set the facility up They put a bunch of money into it. They even bought a little bit of that corporate debt, but they hardly bought any. They just sat back and watched all these people go and try to front run them because there was so much news, so many people talking about it. Everybody fell right into that idea that the Federal Reserve was going to be buying up this corporate debt. The Federal Reserve didn't have to do anything. All they had to do was just establish it.
There's plenty of other tools that the Federal Reserve could use. And one of these tools that he said that the Federal Reserve could use was something called credible threats. And if you're not familiar with credible threats, or the way he describes it in the speech anyway, is if you can imagine a guy who produces or invents a gold machine that can produce as much gold at will. Once that information has gotten out that this guy has this gold machine that can produce as much gold with very little energy or cost, the price of gold would immediately fall on the market. It would just plummet. Even before the guy produces a single ounce of gold, just that credible threat that this guy has this machine would be enough to change the markets. And that's what the Federal Reserve is using right now, is these credible threats. You think about it, the Federal Reserve years ago used to be a very quiet, they would come out and make a statement every couple of months, they were very quiet. Now it's like all Fed all the time. You go onto the news and you can find where another Fed governor or president has given another speech or some kind of news interview. They are out there all the time, constantly giving their words. It's the credible threat that they are looking for.
Thank you, Simon, from the Uneducated Economist on YouTube. So a question asked, how can I hedge this, Jose? So the first thing is get out of debt. Stop financing things. Interest rates will eat you alive. Do your research. Know the companies you invest in. Save some money. Have some cash. This is collapsing as we speak. But you can excel and prevail in these markets. For a lot of people, when the time comes to pay the piper, they will have to pay. The Feds know exactly what they are doing. Their game, they invented it, it's their money. Even with this hidden tax called inflation that we are paying right now as I speak. With that said, thank you guys. As always, I'll continue to keep an eye out and my ears open. See you guys on the next video. Stay free.
It ain't hard to tell. I excel.